All right. It looks like, obviously, here in the UK, it looks like we're very close to London being on lockdown. So, obviously, with everything that's going on in the world with COVID-19 and such like, I thought that this would be a great time to kind of talk a little bit about using a journal. I know I've touched on this in previous videos, where my earpiece just went out there. I don't know what happened, but anyway, I clearly don't need it. Anyway, so I've touched on this in previous videos where, journaling, I find an incredibly powerful tool, and I'll explain how I use it. And I've actually come up with about 7 or 8 different ways that I do use it. And one of them being obviously going through what I do and self-modeling, and I'll touch on that in a moment. Interestingly enough, yesterday I had a call from somebody who wanted a little bit of help. And so we started chatting, and he had gone through a situation where somebody had said something to him, and he tried to sort of maintain his calm, and eventually he got a little bit irritated by it, or a little bit upset about it, and obviously it caused a little bit of a disagreement. And he was feeling, I guess, all sorts of emotions around that wasn't really him, in the sense of he felt that he'd done something that he shouldn't have done. He shouldn't have reacted in that way. And I thought, look, this is an interesting way of using your journal as well, because there are going to be times where you do things, and if you've got kind of emotions going on with it, then again, a journal is a great tool for that. So let me get into this, because I think if you're going to really use a journal powerfully, my whole focus is that everything I'm doing is to help create a better quality of life, both for myself and for the people that I want to share my ideas with, which means you. Within that, I would say that anything that you want to accomplish, so like most of the people I talk to are goal-driven, they're ambitious, which is, it's brilliant. So they want to create a better quality of life. And so within that, what you have absolute control over is you. You do not have control over other people. There are certain aspects of things you have zero control over, like what we're facing at the moment, a pandemic, going around the world. I don't have any direct control over that, but I can control, obviously, what I do now, and I can control what goes on in here. So this is really where everything happens. So it's that idea that, anything you want to accomplish, whether it's in business, whether it's physical, whether it's finances, anything you want to accomplish, there will be a strategy for it that you need to do, take action on, that you need to execute on. But behind all of that, most of the success is really driven by what goes on in here. You probably heard the expression before that all success is 20% mechanics, 80% psychology. And that's very true. I was actually listening to Joe Rogan yesterday on his podcast, great podcast, by the way. And he was interviewing Dom D'Agostino, who's the guy who does a lot of research around ketogenic diets and the body being in a ketogenic state, nutritional ketogenesis, and also another guy, I think his surname's Lane, who is, if I understand correctly, some sort of like he's a coach for powerlifters and bodybuilders. But actually his background, he has a PhD in nutritional biology. I think that's correct. So 2 great minds, 2 scientists, really. And so I was listening to them, and they were talking about various things about losing weight, getting into shape. And Joe made this point about, it's like, really, it's just about discipline. People need a certain level of discipline. But discipline itself is what? It's here in the mind. So yes, anyone can say to you, simple strategy for lose weight, eat less, exercise more. That's it, 2 steps. You don't need anything else. But that, as simple as it sounds, how many people actually implement that, stick to it, maintain it, stay with it? Very few, tiny percentage, which demonstrates very powerfully that everything goes on in here. So it's what you do here. And one of my big missions, based on the stats that I've seen, where we've seen over the last few years a massive increase in the number of desperation deaths. So deaths by suicide, deaths by alcohol, deaths by drugs. Then really a lot of that comes down to, can I help people manage this? If I can help you manage this, take control of your mental destiny, then as ability massively of being successful across your financial destiny, across your physical destiny, across your relationship destiny. Does that make sense? And without a doubt, for me, a tool, single most powerful tool that I ever use. Now, of course, a journal by itself is just a notebook, with blank pages in it. But the blank pages, it's what you do with them. So let me break this down a little bit. I've written down a few ideas. I'm not going to go through every single way I use a journal. I'm thinking right now, I'm going to put together a bigger course on this, because as I got into it, I realized how much content there is and how much I do use my journal and the many different ways in which I use it. And I thought, actually, I'll turn it into a mini course, and I'll put it out for the cost of like $15, $20, something like the cost of a decent book. and make that available to everybody. But this certainly give you an insight into it and some of the ways that I do use it. So first and foremost, understand my guiding principles behind using a journal. So this is my first point. So my guiding principles are my journal is there to help me think in order to gain clarity. Clarity is absolutely everything, because clarity means that you understand something. So if you understand, like if you're here and you want to get here, like this is a goal and you're currently here, there's this gap. If you have clarity of what you need to do, clarity of your strategy, that's phenomenal, because without that clarity, you can't take the right action. Does that make sense? So now apply that to anything. If I was talking about earlier about the person I spoke to yesterday who was feeling very kind of, I guess, stuck in this kind of conflict situation with their emotions where they'd done something and behaved in a way that they wish they hadn't. So if you have clarity around why that happened, then of course, what can you do in the future? You can change your behavior. You can modify something. You can recognize what maybe triggered that behavior. And so you can begin to recognize that if that started again, you can change it. You can do something about it. You can interrupt your pattern. You can change your state immediately before you get to that place. That's all clarity. So that's my guiding principle. It's like, can I use it to help me think and therefore to give me clarity, and to use that clarity to obviously take more control over this, so I can take more control over my behavior, my actions, so that I can direct and master the different areas of my life and have an extraordinary quality of life and an extraordinary business which serves people. So that's my principles, thinking and clarity. That's the two things behind everything I do in my journal. Now, thinking is what? Thinking is about asking questions, because all thought is preceded by a question. So if I want to find an answer, if I want to find a solution, then the best thing to do is to turn everything into a question. So rather than saying, oh, this sucks, nothing works for me, this virus couldn't have come at a worse time. No, there's no good time for a virus, for a pandemic, obviously. And there's no good time for some of the things that will happen to you or you feel that happening to you. It's like, can we turn something into a question? So better than saying this sucks. And like we're seeing at the moment, a lot of people are going to suffer financially. Of course they are. My business is going to take a hit. I'm sure it is. But rather than dwell on that or just making the statement, my business is going to take a hit, can I do something about it? Can I write a better question? Can I write a question that says, how can I utilize what's going on to make sure that my business comes back stronger? How can I use this to serve more people right now? So immediately, I'm changing my focus by changing the question. And by changing the question, once I've asked the question, so if I write the question at the top of a page in my journal, then of course the next step is now I'm thinking. Now my brain wants to come up with answers to that question. And so once I've put the question down, from a thinking point of view, I'm straight into, let's start coming up with answers. So this is about being creative. So it stimulates your creativity. Now, I've touched on this before where, one of the things I do is listen to podcasts, read lots of books so that I've got plenty to draw on. Because, ideas is about connecting the dots. It's about finding new ways or utilizing what you've got in a different way. There's a brilliant example, which is there's that movie with Tom Hanks in it, whether it's the Apollo 11 or Apollo 13, one of the Apollo missions. And where, they've gone off into space and something's gone wrong. And so basically they're going to run out of oxygen or air before they get back to Earth. So they need to address this. So there's the problem. How do we solve this? How do we find a way to give these guys enough oxygen to get them safely back home? And so the whole movie is centered around that. And so using what they've got inside their space capsule and nothing else, because of course you can't UPS anything to them. It's like, this is what you've got. We need to find a solution with that. So in the same way, right now, this is what I've got. This is what's going on in my business. This is what's available to me. How do I use all of this and this to find a solution? So asking questions is very, very powerful. So that's my first thing. So then within that, of course, if I'm asking questions to think, that ties into, I use my journal to set my goals. So setting my goals for over the next 10 years as a vision, setting my goals for this year, breaking those 12-month goals down into what I want over this coming quarter. So like the first quarter, we're in March now. We're coming towards April, so I'll be looking at my yearly goals and breaking down, okay, what have we done this quarter, setting my goals for the next quarter. So that's part of it. Tied in with that, of course, is then the plans. Plans come back to asking questions. So I'll be asking a new set of questions based on the goal, based on what I want to accomplish in the quarter. And also what's important here is I get to look at the previous quarter. So another way I use my journal is I'm using it for goals, I'm using it for planning, but I'm also using it for reviewing. So review the last quarter. So again, breaking that down into questions, what went well and what can I learn from that? What didn't go as I wanted it to? What can I learn from that? Can I dig deeper and find out why it didn't go as I wanted it to? Because of course, if I can find those lessons, what can I do with them? I can bring them into my planning for this next quarter. So again, I can bring that across. So it's like goals, planning, review. So using it to bring lessons from the past into the present to use in the future. Very powerful way of using a journal. Then one other way, which is there may be times where you do something incredibly well, but you don't do it consistently. So for example, there were I remember years ago, I worked with a guy who was into clay pigeon shooting. I don't know if you've seen this. They've got a shotgun and you go and shoot. There's a little machine that fires these big clay pellets, I guess they're called. I'm not sure. And it throws them into the air and you shoot them. So they get two in quick succession. My kids have got the Nintendo, the Wii Select or whatever it's called. They got one of those things and they've got one of these Mario Olympic games and there's clay pigeon shooting in there as well. So you may have seen it on a game or you may have seen it in real life. And this guy was in a position where he was doing well and he'd have days where he shot incredibly well and he'd have days where he shot incredibly badly. And it was like, well, how do I make myself more consistent so that I shoot better more often? So that the more times I come shooting, the more competitions I enter, I can rely on that level of consistency to make sure I do incredibly well. So I walked him through a process of basically getting him to understand what it is he did when he shot well, from a point of view of what he was focused on in here, how he used his breathing, how he used his body, how he used his expressions, how he felt. Like I got to focus on all of it and we associate certain triggers with it so that he could replicate it. So that is a way of basically what I call self-modeling. So modeling is a concept I take from neurolinguistic programming because modeling is the heart of NLP. It's this idea of find someone who's achieved a great result, understand their recipe, and the process to do that, behavioral modeling. So I'm kind of applying that to myself with my journal. So it's looking at things that I've done incredibly well that I'm not doing consistently. And for you as well, look at things you do incredibly well that you'd like to do more consistently and kind of go, okay, remember a time when you did it well. What did you do? And you break it down and you kind of breaking it down into almost a logical recipe of steps where you say, okay, that's what I do when I'm there. That's how I breathe. That's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm thinking about. Those are my beliefs around all of this. So if I can remind myself of that, if I can put myself back in that same emotional state, if I can put myself back in that same physiological state, then maybe modeling point of view. One of the things I have been incredibly consistent about throughout all of my adult life is exercise. Like finding the motivation to exercise, never been an issue for me. But of course, because I do that incredibly well in that aspect of my life, another way I use self-modeling is say, okay, look, I do that incredibly well. I never have an issue with motivation around that aspect of my life. So what is it I'm doing there? And can I bring that to another aspect of my life? So I did this to bring that understanding to how I approach food. Like I've always eaten well, but there are times where I eat well and I eat badly at the same time. So it's not like I throw out all the good food and replace it with junk. It's like I eat all the good food and I eat the junk as well. So there were times where I was doing that. So it's like I wanted to be more consistent with my habits around food. And part of that was that my motivation was waning, flexing. Times it was high, times it was very low. So I thought, well, the one area where I'm consistently motivated is exercise. So let me look at that. Let me self-model, dig down deep into what it is I'm doing. What are my beliefs around that? And bring that into other areas of my life. And that's what I've done. It's been very, very powerful, worked very well. And again, I use my journal to do that. And I'm asking the question, what am I doing? And I kind of walk myself through it. So with things like that, it's starting with that end result. So if I feel highly motivated to go and exercise, what's driving that feeling? And that's my first question. What drives it? And then as I get deeper, it's like, what triggers it? And it turns out there's a certain set of pictures that I focus on that trigger it immediately for me. And it wasn't so much the content of the pictures as it was the structure of the picture, like the the fact it was a movie, the fact that it was in color, the fact that there was a soundtrack playing with it. So there's all these things associated with it. And I thought, well, if I bring that to food, boom, I have a different motivation around food. And so I use it for self-modeling. Does that make sense? So that's a very, very powerful tool. And then the final thing I want to share with you, to keep this kind of short for now, is I use my journal for gratitude. So, many, many years ago, I probably heard it from a number of people, including Tony Robbins and others, and Sir John Templeton, I think he was, who talked about, if you want a great life, live in an attitude of gratitude. And I'm sure you've heard that before. But it's very easy when things are going well, it's easy to feel grateful. When things are going really crappy, it's easy to feel that somehow life's not fair, things are letting you down, other people are letting you down, the world's letting you down, God's letting you down. It's like all these kind of things. And that's where it's really useful to use your journal to just literally ask the question, what am I grateful for? And, you can add to that, what am I grateful for in my relationships? What am I grateful for in my career? What am I grateful for with my friends? What am I grateful for about my body? What am I grateful for in my health? And so you can go through all of these. And again, it's similar answers. There are things you can be incredibly grateful for. The fact that you are still above ground and breathing is something to be incredibly grateful for. The fact that my heart's still beating, I'm incredibly grateful for. So there's always things you can be grateful for. So list them and do that as a simple, get into the habit of doing that on a regular basis. I'm not going to say you have to do it every day. I certainly don't do it every day, but certainly, once a week, even once a month, just sitting down and do it. It puts you in an amazing emotional state of gratitude. And certainly from that place of gratitude, it's easy to begin to recognize that anything's possible. So that's another way I use my journal. So just to kind of summarize that, and as I said, I'm going to go into more detail about this. I'm going to turn it into a whole mini course, which I will make available. But just to kind of recap, my whole approach to journaling is I'm there to gain clarity. So it's clarity around goals, clarity around plans, clarity around reviewing things. And what I didn't touch on is clarity around, problems, finding solutions to problems, clarity of the problem. Because sometimes you find yourself thinking you know what the problem is and trying to find a solution, and then discover that you've solved the wrong problem because it wasn't the real issue. It was just a surface problem, not a deeper problem. So, I use it for those sort of things. I use it, as I said, for self-modeling, understanding me, particularly around the areas of motivation or something I do incredibly well, and bringing that into now and being able to leverage that in other areas of my life. I talked about emotions that you may feel and trying to understand why you're going through a certain emotion, understanding the triggers behind it, understanding what's driving it. And certainly, as the guy I spoke to yesterday, what I said to him was, it sounds to me like you've violated one of your own values. So values are things that are important to us. You probably have a value around how you should behave towards other people. And of course, in a moment of irritation or anger, you violated that in some way. And therefore, afterwards, you feel a little bit embarrassed about it, guilty about it, shameful about it. But recognize that every emotion is here to serve you. So what I actually got him to do, this is kind of an added bit, I got him to say, look, in your journal, just write, how does this serve me? So that's one of the ways I approach problems, is to flip it with a different question. So clarity, thinking is all about questions. And I've got good at asking very different questions that can empower me, questions that can cause me to look at a problem from different angles. So therefore, you look at it from different angles, you find different solutions. So handling emotions, self-modeling, planning, goal setting, reviewing, bringing lessons from the past into the now to use in the future, managing my motivation, my emotional state, and feelings of gratitude, reminding myself of what to be grateful for, whatever is going on. Because one of the beliefs I live by is no matter what is going on, there are always things you can be grateful for. And if you remind yourself of that, it's a lot easier to solve the problems that are facing you when you come from a place of gratitude than when you come from a place of anger or upset or hurt. That makes sense. All right. So powerful it is. The one thing I would say is just try it. It's very easy to dismiss it. And I think some of the other more powerful tools around using your mind, like mindfulness or meditation, they're kind of require a little bit more effort, maybe a little bit more of a learning curve. But a journal, literally, anyone can go buy a notebook, anyone can go get a pen and literally just start with, what do I want? Even if that's the first question you write down, what do I want? Then you can start from there and you'll start coming up with ideas. Some of the questions I ask myself is what goals should I really be setting? I put down a goal and it doesn't really seem to be making progress. So sometimes I question the goal. I challenge my own thinking in some ways. So I encourage you, go get a notebook, go get a pen, start doing it. In the beginning, to make it a habit, force yourself every day to open your journal and just write a question and come up with some answers. No matter what it is, just do it. Get into the habit of doing it. You will experience all sorts of advantages and benefits. It will give you an edge in all areas of your life and allow you to create a better quality for your business, and certainly an extraordinary quality of life. So go do it. And as I said, I'll let you know about when I put together the course. I've sort of started putting the slides together already, and I will record the whole thing and I'll put it out there probably for around about $20, as I said, as a, kind of a cost of a decent book. And it'll be a more detailed description of what I've talked about here. But you can certainly get started with what I've shared with you today. So go get started. And remember, if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Give me a like, share a comment with me. Let me know how this is going. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about this. And also, tell a few other people about it. Help me grow my channel. Help me grow the amount of watched minutes I get so I can have more of an impact, reach more people, and serve you and everyone else at a deeper level. All right, God bless. Stay safe. Stay isolated if you need to. Think of the people who are more vulnerable than you, because if we self-isolate, we can get through all of this a lot quicker. We will come out the other side. I think this is going to be a great opportunity to recognize what we are truly grateful for, and also a great opportunity to really get clarity around the things that are genuinely important to us, not just as individuals, but as a society and as a globe, and how we treat each other. I believe some great things will come out of all of this. All right, stay safe. Talk to you next time.